welcome to Panorama News. We're bringing you the latest in politics, economics, and sports. I'm Dina Mamdouh, and I'm glad to be joined today with my colleague, Nermeen Nazim. Nermeen.
Hello, Dina. Hello, everybody. It's time for a panorama of comprehensive events. We start, as usual, with our main headlines.
Egyptians begin voting in referendum on the constitutional amendments. President Sisi presides over a meeting on modernizing the oil sector. And Minister Shukri holds talks with South African counterpart in Cairo.
Welcome back. Those were the main headlines and more details. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi presided over a meeting on Saturday with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Presidential Assistant for National and Strategic Projects Engineer Sharif Ismail, Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources Tariq Al-Mullah, and the head of the National Service Projects Organization, General Mustafa Amin. Presidential spokesperson Ambassador Bassam Radi said that the meeting tackled the Ministry of Petroleum's plans for oil refining and petrochemical industries. In this regard, the President gave his directives for the ministry to upgrade the petrochemical sector to cope with the changes of the global market. Radi added that Al-Mullah briefed the President on the special studies concerning the establishment of a refining oil and petrochemical complex, including its economic indicators and its financing, as well as its accomplishment schedule. Al-Mullah emphasized the strategic importance of this project in accordance with the state ambitious plans and serving its development objectives, attracting more foreign investments to Egypt. The spokesperson also said that Al-Mullah reviewed the latest efforts of the ministry in the field of oil and gas exploration, in addition to modernizing the petroleum sector via the structural reform plans and through developing the governance systems and human resources.
Also on Saturday, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi held a meeting with Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli and the head of the Medium, Small and Micro Projects apparatus, Dr. Naveen Goma. The head of the state gave his directives to enhance the activities of the apparatus as one of the mechanisms to provide the youth with more job opportunities, hence to raise the support of the social and economic safety networks. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Radi said the meeting also reviewed the activities of the apparatus in the past 5 years to offer services for the medium, small and micro project sector. These services included financing the projects and also marketing and logistical support, which ended with affording about 1.5 million job opportunities.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi greeted on Saturday the Armenian Catholic Church on the occasion of Easter. Sisi delegated Presidential Secretary Hossein Zaatar to extend the Easter greetings and attend a celebration held by the church on the occasion.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi voted on Saturday in the Heliopolis suburb of Cairo on a referendum of constitutional amendments. First Lady Intisar al-Sisi casted her vote in Martyr Mustafa Yusri School in Cairo's Heliopolis district. Nearly 61 million Egyptians began voting on Saturday in the referendum, which started inside Egypt on April 20th for 3 days. Earlier, the National Election Authority said that it took all the necessary procedures to facilitate the voting process on the constitutional amendments for the voters, particularly for the people with special needs.
Egyptians took to the ballot stations on Saturday to vote on the referendum on the constitutional amendments. Details.
Polling stations across Egypt opened their doors early Saturday at 9 a.m. Cairo local time, the referendum on a series of constitutional amendments. There are currently 10,878 central polling stations and 13,919 polling stations across the country available for the vote, which closes on Monday night. More than 61 million Egyptians are eligible to vote in the referendum. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi cast his vote at Martyr Mustafa Yusri Mira School in Heliopolis suburb of the capital. Egypt's parliamentary speaker Ali Abdel Al told reporters on Saturday that all the suggestions and opinions on the new constitutional amendments, whether for or against were heard for 30 days. Abdelal added that the turnout at the polling stations reflected how keen citizens were to practice their political rights, as well as their belief in the recent political economic reforms achievements. The head of the authority, Judge Lashin Ibrahim, said around 20,000 judges are supervising the voting process at ballot boxes, and 55 local civil society groups, 5 foreign non-government organizations, and 3 national councils monitoring the vote process. Egyptians who live in governorates outside of their local election constituencies can vote at special polling stations reserved for out-of-governorate voters. Egyptians are voting on the proposed amendments to the 2014 Charter, which were overwhelmingly approved by the Parliament on Tuesday, with 531 out of 596 members in favor, 22 against, and 1 abstention. Lashin explains that the amendments would pass based on the absolute majority of valid votes. The election authority has set up special polling stations in industrial zones in the under-construction new administrative capital east of Cairo and at sites of other national mega projects to allow construction workers to vote. New polling stations have also been set at Cairo International Airport and at the major railway stations to draw more voters, and arrangements made at stations to accommodate citizens with special needs.
Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli cast his ballot on Saturday. He says that voting will reflect the atmosphere of the stability and democracy that we are witnessing now. After voting, Madbouli gave press statements to encourage Egyptians to participate in the referendum and to practice right to vote on the amendments. He further said that holding a referendum on the constitutional amendments is a message to the whole world, ensuring political stability in Egypt. Meanwhile, the cabinet called on citizens to participate in the referendum on constitutional amendments. The Prime Minister said that the government is committed to provide all logistics needed for the National Election Authority to carry out the referendum and to allow citizens to practice their constitutional rights and to vote in referendum on constitutional amendments.
A number of ministers and state high-ranking officials headed on Saturday where they casted the votes in the constitutional amendments referendums to urge voters to turn out in high numbers for a 3-day referendum. During casting his vote, Minister of Endowments Mukhtar Gom'a stressed on the importance of participating in the constitutional amendments. Meanwhile, Minister of Health Hala Zaid hailed the positive participation of women in the referendum. Minister of Transport Kamil Wazir said that the Egyptians are making history towards a better future by casting their votes. He added that the constitutional amendments referendum aimed to modify articles that were not taken in 2014.
In the same context, Culture Minister Ines Abdeldaim said Saturday that participating in referendum on the constitutional amendments is a national duty that contributes to the nation-building march. After casting her ballot in the referendum in Sheikh Zayed, the minister asserted that Egypt is moving steadily towards development and prosperity. Abdeldaim lauded the well-organization of the voting process and the high turnout of the citizens who were keen to cast their ballots.
Al-Azhar Grand Imam Sheikh Ahmed Al-Tayyib headed on Saturday to Martyr Mustafa Yusri Al-Meira School in Heliopolis district in Cairo, where he casted his vote on the constitutional amendments. Meanwhile, Pope Tawadros II of Alexandria and Patriarch of St. Mark Diocese casted his ballot in the referendum on the constitutional amendments in Cairo's Al-Waili district. In a statement after voting, the Pope expressed his pleasure over participating in the referendum, saying that the amendments were carefully considered by the Parliament. Pope Tawadros described his participation as a citizenship right, calling on the Egyptians to head to the polls and express their opinions freely. He confirmed that voting in the constitutional amendments is a national duty.
The head of the Arab League mission to follow up on the constitutional amendments referendum, Haifa Abu Al-Ghazal, lauded the voting process as well as the vital role played by the National Election Authority in supervising the referendum. This came during her inspection of the number of polling stations in Cairo and Zamalek district. She added that the voting process began smoothly in most polling stations, adding that the voters asserted that the referendum's logistics were available. She also said that the voters highlighted the key role played by the army and police personnel in securing the voting process.
Egypt, visually impaired, will be able to cast a vote for the first time after ballot papers were printed using the Braille method as the first day of the referendum on the constitutional amendments in Egypt kicks off Saturday. Braille ballot allows blind people and those with visual impairments to read documents through raising the raised dots representing the letters of the alphabet. Printing Braille ballot papers comes as part of the efforts exerted by the National Election Authority to facilitate the voting process for people with special needs.
Egyptian expatriates on Saturday continue voting in the referendum on the constitutional amendments in the Egyptian embassies and consulates in 124 countries. Head of the National Election Authority, Lashin Ibrahim, said that all facilities are provided to the Egyptians abroad to cast their ballots freely. More details.
Egyptian expatriates on Saturday continue voting in the referendum on the constitutional amendments in the Egyptian embassies and consulates in 124 countries. The voting runs from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. according to the local time of each country from April 19 to April 21st. A large number of Egyptians worldwide rallied to cast their ballots, especially in the Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain and Morocco. Egyptians in the United States, Canada, Britain, France, Belgium, Italy and other Western countries, as well as Australia, New Zealand, Romania, Japan, South Korea, China and Afghanistan also rallied to participate in the referendum. Women, youth, people with special needs, elderly citizens also flocked to the polling stations in the Egyptian diplomatic missions to cast their ballots in the referendum. Head of the National Election Authority, Lashin Ibrahim, said that the Immigration Ministry, Foreign Ministry and the National Election Authority are in continuous cooperation and coordination regarding the referendum on constitutional amendments abroad. He added that all facilities are provided to the Egyptians abroad to cast their ballots freely. The National Election Authority also said that the first day voting on constitutional amendments witnessed huge turnout, adding that it didn't receive any complaints. Earlier, Egyptian embassies called on citizens to vote in the referendum on the constitutional amendments, emphasizing that the voters could review information on the constitutional amendments as well as the voting rules through the National Election Authority website. For their part, the Egyptian communities abroad reiterated their keenness to participate in the voting in the referendum on the constitutional amendments.
Earlier, the Egyptian embassies and consulates across the world concluded preparations to receive the Egyptians abroad to cast their ballots in the referendum on constitutional amendments. Egyptian embassies called on citizens to vote in the referendum on the constitutional amendments, emphasizing that the voters could review information on the constitutional amendments as well as the voting rules through the National Election Authority website. For their part, the Egyptian communities abroad reiterated their keenness to participate in the voting in the referendum on the constitutional amendments.
Minister of Immigration and Egyptian Expatriates Safer Nabila Makram convened with the members of the Operation Room, which was created to follow up with the voting process of the Egyptian expats in the referendum on the constitutional amendments. The Operation Room is tasked with following up with voting process outside Egypt, answers the voters' inquiries and deal with any complaints of the voters. The minister expressed that there are hotlines, emails and social media pages for direct communication with the voter abroad. The minister gave her directives to deal with the complaints and inquiries immediately.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry announced that a committee was formed at the ministry to follow up with the voting process in the referendum on constitutional amendments abroad, as well as communicating and coordinating with the Egyptian embassies and consulates. The committee is headed by Deputy Foreign Minister Hamdi Sanad Louza. All Egyptians abroad during the time of the vote are eligible to cast their ballots using their valid passports or their IDs.
Still with the top diplomatic activities, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry held a press conference with the South African Foreign Minister after finishing their talks, which discussed a number of issues of mutual concern. Details.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry held a meeting on Saturday with his South African counterpart Lindowi Sisulu in Cairo. The meeting discussed boosting mutual cooperation between Egypt and South Africa, particularly in the trade and investment fields. Shoukry said enhancing bilateral ties will have its positive impacts on the Black Continent in general in the light of the keenness of both President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and President Cyril Ramaphosa to achieve comprehensive African development. For her part, Sisulu said, "We are working on reaching the maximum benefits of the African capabilities of the free trade, which was ratified by 22 countries. Meanwhile, the two top diplomats held a press conference after their talks, in which the South African minister thanked Shoukry for inviting her to visit Egypt and asked him to visit South Africa in the nearest chance. Sisulu also highlighted the importance of the African Troika meeting, which Egypt will host as the current president of the African Union. The minister described Egypt as a strong country with a strong economy, expressing her country's will to support Egypt as the president of the EU. Answering a question regarding the Palestinian cause, Shoukry said there is a consensus among the Arab League member states on the necessity of reaching a final solution to the Palestinian crisis based on international legality, the Arab Initiative, and the two-state solution. He added that the Sunday meeting of the Arab foreign ministers will be held upon a request from Palestine to listen to President Mahmoud Abbas' vision regarding the current situation in the Palestinian territories. For her part, Sisulu asserted her country's support to the legal rights of the Palestinian people.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas arrived in Cairo on Saturday for talks with